Hey everyone, so what I'm going to talk about today is the amplitude, frequency, and period of sine and cosine graphs. First what we're going to talk about is the amplitude of a sine and cosine graph. Here are the general equations for sine and cosine. Y equals a sine bx and y equals a cos bx. What the amplitude refers to is basically the height of a sine and cosine curve. When you create a general sketch of sine, you start at the origin and you make a mountain and a valley. That's one full curve. And then when you take a general sketch of cosine, you make just a big valley. What the amplitude is, it's your distance from the halfway point. And in trig, we call this the midline. In this case, my midline is the x-axis. These two pieces, these two segments that I drew, would be the exact same length because they have the exact same distance from the midline. Same thing goes with the cosine graph. These would represent my amplitude. Now again, distance cannot be negative, so the real equation for amplitude is the absolute value of a. Next what we're going to talk about is the frequency of a sine and cosine graph. Again, using our general equations, y equals a sine bx and y equals a cos bx, what the frequency refers to is how often you see the curve or how frequent you see a full curve. You see a full sine or cosine curve between 0 and 2 pi. And that's what we're looking for when we deal with frequency. And in order to really know what frequency is, you really need to know what a full curve looks like. A full curve for sine starts at the origin and has a mountain and a valley, and a full curve for cosine is just one big valley. The formula for frequency is the absolute value of b. It's basically just the value that's attached to the x. And it's an absolute value because it's how many you really see, how frequent you see a full curve. You can't have a negative amount of curves. You can only have a positive amount of curves. So that's why the absolute value is there. The last piece of a sine and cosine curve is the period. The period tells you how long it takes for you to see one full curve. So it's really the distance it takes to complete one full sine or cosine curve. Now using your formulas, y equals a sine bx and y equals a cos bx, the way that you find period is you take 2 pi and you divide it by the absolute value of b. That is your formula for period. Basically, you're seeing how many full curves you are fitting in 360, and then you're dividing that by 360 to see how long it takes to make one full curve. Alright, so for this example, I'm going to ask you, what is the amplitude, period, and frequency of this graph? First, what I'm going to do is find the amplitude. The amplitude is just your absolute value of a, so the absolute value of a would be just 4. My frequency is the absolute value of b. B is the 2, so 2 is my frequency. And my period would be 2 pi divided by the frequency, and that's 2 pi over 2, which would get me pi. Now what does this all mean? If I create a sketch of my graph, what I would see is I would see between 0 and 2 pi, I would see 2 full sine curves, and I would see 2 full sine curves because my frequency is 2. I would also have an amplitude of 4 and going down to negative 4. If I created a sketch of this, I would start at the origin because I'm sine. I would know that halfway would be pi, and that's my period. That's how long it takes to make one full sine curve for this graph. So that means between 0 and pi, I would have a mountain and a valley. And then I would have one more mountain and one more valley. And again, I should really redraw that because I want to make sure that I'm reaching that amplitude of 4. So go up, go down, and there you go. For the next example, I'm going to also find my amplitude. My amplitude is the absolute value of 3. My frequency, which is the absolute value of b, which would give me 1/2. And my period which is the 2 pi divided by my absolute value of b. 2 pi over 1/2, what I would have to do is keep, change, flip, and this would give me a period of 4 pi. Now again, this all means something on the graph. What this means is that when I sketch this graph, I know that I'm going to go up to a max of 3 and a min to -3 because that's my amplitude. I know between 0 and 2 pi, I'm only going to see half of a sine curve, or cosine curve in this case, I'm sorry. So for this, what I would do is I would start at 3, because cosine starts at its max, and I would only see half of the cosine curve. Well, cosine is a big valley, so I would only see this little section here, half of it. So between 0 and 2 pi, that's what I would see. But if I wanted to see a full curve, I would have to go over to 4 pi, because that's how long it takes for me to get one full curve. That's my period. So to make one full curve, what I would have to do is extend this to 4 pi, and then I would be able to complete my full cosine curve. Hope this video helped you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow in class.